You tie the final knot on the bandage, your fingers moving with the quiet precision of someone who has done this 1,000 times, 10,000 times. The muscle memory so deep it lives somewhere below conscious thought, somewhere in the tendons and the fingertips themselves. And the golden retriever wags his tail so hard his whole body shakes with the effort of it, his entire being committed to this expression of gratitude, this simple animal joy at the absence of pain. And you can't help but smile. Not the professional smile you paste on for worried owners, not the careful reassuring grin you deploy when the news is going to be difficult, not the performance of calm you've learned to give when a family is about to lose someone they love, but a real smile, the kind that starts somewhere in your chest and arrives at your face without asking permission. The kind that reaches your eyes and crinkles the corners and reminds you, in this moment specifically, why you chose this life over the other ones that were available to you. Why you gave up the hospital residency that Dr. Carmichael spent 3 months trying to convince you to take. Why you turned down the surgery fellowship that would have paid 3 times what you make now. Why you walked away from everything your professors told you was the correct and sensible and ambitious path. Because this specific thing, a dog who is going to be okay, an owner who sat in your waiting room with her hands folded in her lap trying not to cry, and is now standing here with her shoulders down and relief pouring off her like heat. This is enough. This has always been enough. You hand Mrs. Higgins the leash, and she thanks you for staying late the way people thank you when they really mean it. Pressing the check into your palm with both of her hands wrapped around yours, holding on for just a moment longer than a simple transaction requires. And she leads the golden retriever out through your waiting room and into the rainy night beyond, his claws clicking against your clean tile floor in a rhythm that has always made you happy, that particular sound, and you watch them go. Watch them move through the glass door and into the dark, wet evening. The clinic settles into itself around you, the refrigeration unit humming its steady note, the rain against the roof, the distant sound of the city going about its nighttime business beyond your walls, and you're already composing tomorrow in your head. The cat with the kidney stones who comes in at 9, the border collie who needs his annual shots, the rabbit that some kid accidentally dropped from a second-floor window and whose owner has been calling twice a day. You're reaching for the light switch when a fist slams against the glass so hard the door rattles in its frame, and the sound tears through the quiet like something physical, and you spin around and your heart is already doing something strange and fast and frightened before your brain has processed a single detail. Because the body knows, the body is smarter than the mind in moments like this. The body reads threat before the mind can organize the information into coherent thought. And what you see when your eyes focus doesn't make sense, doesn't compute, doesn't belong in the grammar of your life. A man standing at your door soaked entirely through, his clothes black with rain and plastered to his skin, shivering with a violence that looks almost like he's fighting something. And he's holding a red towel against the wound, and you notice the towel before anything else because you are trained, professionally and instinctively, to assess injury in the first 3 seconds, to read the body's distress signals and quantify them. And what you read in this towel is terrible. Wild-eyed in the specific way that people get wild-eyed when they have crossed some threshold that cannot be uncrossed, some line in the geography of a life that, once passed, changes the whole landscape behind you. And he isn't holding a leash, he's holding a friend. The friend is slumped across his shoulder with one arm hanging limp and wrong, at an angle that arms don't naturally make, and the other arm is pressed against his own stomach, pressed hard, the way you press hard, when you are trying to keep something inside that wants desperately to come out. It is soaked through entirely, not damp, not wet, but saturated past the point of usefulness, and it is dripping, a thin, continuous stream of red that hits the sidewalk and mixes with the rainwater and spreads in a widening stain across the wet concrete. And you can see from 20 feet away that this is serious, that serious is actually an inadequate word for what this is. And the man meets your eyes through the glass, and something passes between you that isn't a request. It's past request. It's beyond the territory of asking. Your first instinct is self-preservation, the oldest instinct, the one that has kept the species alive through every catastrophe. And you wave them away, your hand moving in clear, unmistakable negation. and you point down the street to where the hospital's lights glow through the rain 4 blocks away. 4 blocks. Just 4 blocks. They have everything there. Real doctors with real degrees and real residencies and real experience. You are just a veterinarian. You fix animals. You fix broken paws and give rabies shots and remove embedded ticks and tell old ladies that their cats need to lose weight. And the man at the door shakes his head, a single slow, deliberate shake that says he has already considered and rejected every alternative, that he is here because here is the only place left to be. And his face doesn't soften, doesn't shift into pleading, doesn't perform desperation, it just goes very still, with a stillness that is more frightening than any expression you could name. And he reaches into his jacket with his free hand and pulls out a pistol and taps it against the glass, once, measuring, twice, confirming. And the sound of metal on glass in the quiet street is the sound of a door closing behind you. And your clinic transforms in an instant from a place of ordinary healing into something else entirely. Mud spreading across your clean tile in dark wet prints, rainwater pooling by the door, and blood. Blood on your floor, blood leaving a trail from the entrance to the exam table like a line drawn by some terrible cartographer. And your clinic transforms in an instant from a place of ordinary healing into something else entirely. Mud spreading across your clean tile in dark wet prints, rainwater pooling by the door, and blood. Blood on your floor, blood leaving a trail from the entrance to the exam table like a line drawn by some terrible cartographer, marking the boundary between the life you had and the life you're about to have. The gunman kicks the door shut behind them with his heel, a practiced motion, and you help hoist the injured man onto the exam table, and he is heavy and warm and limp. Warm in the specific way of a body that is losing something it cannot afford to lose, losing it faster than it can make more. And you look at the wound, and your voice emerges steadier than you expected. You tell them you are a veterinarian, that your training does not cover this, that you have never done this. And the gunman says 2 words, fix him. And those 2 words contain an entire contract, an entire threat, an entire future. Fix him or join him on this table. Fix him or we know where you live and where your daughter goes to school. Fix him because you are the only option, and options have a way of collapsing when men like this are in the room. And you look at your cabinets, your familiar organized veterinary cabinets, and your hands start moving before your mind gives them permission, your body making the decision your conscious self is still debating, and you find the tranquilizer meant for horses, the heavy anesthetic, the one that drops a 1,000-pound animal in 30 seconds and keeps it down for 20 minutes. And you do the math in your head. Weight estimation, dosage calculation, the formula you've applied to dogs and horses and once to a young giraffe at a sanctuary 3 hours outside the city. And you apply it now to this human patient bleeding on your exam table. And the margin for error in this calculation is the difference between keeping him under and stopping his heart. And you pray, genuinely pray, moving your lips slightly the way you did as a child, the way you haven't since your mother's casket was lowered into the ground. You pray that the numbers are right and that the pharmacology is close enough and that his body is forgiving enough, and you inject the line and the man groans from somewhere deep and involuntary, and his eyes roll back and his body goes slack against the table, all the tension leaving him at once, and he's under. And the clock starts. 20 minutes, maybe 20 minutes, to do something you were never trained to do, something you were never supposed to do, something that exists entirely outside the map of your professional life. And you work fast. Faster than you have ever worked on any patient, the crisis focus arriving like a kind of terrible gift, narrowing your world to the wound and your hands and the space between them. And you clean the wound, and you find the damage. And you read it the way you read every trauma, systematically, without panic, with the focused calm that 12 years of difficult cases is built into you one bad night at a time, and you stitch him up with heavy blue nylon, the strongest suture material you stock. The same gauge you use on working dogs who split themselves open on wire fences, and Great Danes who need internal sutures after abdominal surgery. And you pull the edges of the wound together with careful, deliberate tension, each pass of the needle precise and considered. And it will leave a scar, an ugly, jagged souvenir of this night. But he will be alive to carry it. He will be breathing when you tie the final knot, and you tie the final knot, and you step back. And the gunman who has stood motionless through the entire procedure steps forward and reaches into his jacket and produces an envelope, thick and substantial, and drops it onto the patient's chest without ceremony and says, "Keep your mouth shut. Buy yourself something nice." And then he lifts the man off the table with the practiced ease of someone who has carried unconscious people before and carries him out through the back door. And you stand in your clinic alone, and the silence that descends is a different silence than the one you were standing in 20 minutes ago. Heavier, more complicated, weighted with everything that just happened and everything that is going to happen because of it, and your hands are shaking. You notice your hands are shaking the way you notice weather, observationally, as if they belong to someone else. And you pick up the envelope and open it and count the bills with fingers that aren't entirely steady, and it's $5,000. $5,000 in cash in an envelope dropped on a wounded man's chest, and you stand there for a long time holding it. And part of you, the part that went to school and took an oath and built a practice and pays taxes and coaches your daughter's soccer team on the weekends she's with you, that part wants to call the police, wants to pick up the phone right now and dial and let the system do what the system was built to do. And another part of you is looking at the bills on your desk and the rent notice on the bulletin board and the tuition letter on the counter, and doing a different kind of math, a slower and more shameful math. And you think about the gunman's eyes, the specific quality of coldness in them, the particular certainty of someone who has never once forgotten a face or failed to act on a memory. And you think about what reporting this could mean for a person with eyes like that. And so you mop the blood off your floor with careful, methodical strokes, the same strokes you use every night after difficult cases, and you throw the rags in the outdoor dumpster and cover them with other refuse, and you hide the money in the filing cabinet behind the tax returns from 4 years ago. And you tell yourself it was one time, an anomaly, a terrible aberration that will never happen again. And 3 nights later your phone rings at 2 a.m. You're on the couch in the half-sleep that's become your normal rest since your marriage ended, the television running something familiar in the background, because the silence of the apartment has a texture you haven't learned to live with yet. The number is one you don't recognize. You answer it before you've fully decided to. And the voice is businesslike and calm, the voice of routine. And it says, "The vet who works late. I heard you do good work." And everything in you goes very still. And the voice says, "A friend of mine needs help. Same situation as before. Double the pay." You should hang up. The intelligent and self-preserving and decent thing to do is hang up right now and call the police. And your daughter's face appears in your mind as clearly as if she's in the room with you. Her specific laugh, the one that comes before she's finished the joke because she always cracks herself up. The way she still grabs your hand in parking lots and crowded places without thinking about it, purely by reflex, purely by trust. And you look at the tuition letter on the counter with its red past due stamp bright as a wound, and you give them the address. And the second patient is a woman, and she needs 47 stitches in a line you draw with the same careful tension as the first time. And when you're done, her partner hands you an envelope, and you don't count it until they've gone through the back door, and it's $10,000. And you stand with $10,000 in your hands in your quiet clinic, and something rearranges itself inside you. Something structural and load-bearing rearranges itself so quietly, you almost don't notice it happening. And you start leaving the back door unlocked on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And word moves through channels you can't see and wouldn't understand. The underground telegraph of people who need things the official world can't provide. The patients come. A construction worker with a shattered knee whose wife is 8 months pregnant and who cannot afford to be off a job site. A mother with burns on both palms from something she grabbed that she won't specify. And you don't ask, because the not asking is part of the arrangement. A teenager with a stab wound shallow enough to be frightening, but not deep enough to be immediately fatal, who stares at the ceiling while you work and says nothing the entire time. They all pay cash. They all leave through the back door. None of them ask your name, and you don't ask theirs. And this is the entire social contract of what you've become. And the thing that lets you sleep, the story you tell yourself, is that most of them are not criminals. Most of them are simply people who fell through the gaps that the official world leaves between its systems. People for whom the emergency room means a bill that will follow them for a decade. People who are just trying to continue existing in a city that makes existing expensive and complicated and sometimes dangerous. And yes, sometimes there are the other ones, the ones whose wounds tell stories you can construct from the evidence without being told, the ones with the steady hands and the flat eyes and the particular patience of people who are accustomed to waiting for things to resolve in their favor. And you treat them the same way. You buy new equipment with the money. Sharper instruments, stronger lights, a proper surgical kit, and the clinic looks better and functions better. And you tell your ex-wife when she drops your daughter off that the practice is finally finding its footing, and you put a deposit on your daughter's first semester. And the relief that floods through you when the payment confirmation arrives is so total and so physical, it nearly brings you to your knees right there in the kitchen. 3 months pass. You've made more money than you made in the previous 2 years combined. The filing cabinet is full, genuinely full, stuffed past capacity. And you've started a second cache behind the water heater in the utility room. And you've become good at this work, genuinely technically proficient in a domain that didn't exist for you 4 months ago. And you feel not proud, never proud. Pride would require a comfort with what you're doing that you haven't achieved, but capable and necessary and sought after, which is a feeling you'd forgotten the texture of. And this comfort, this settling, this quiet satisfaction in routine is your first mistake. It's a Thursday around 2 in the morning after a straightforward shoulder dislocation. You pop it back in and wrap it and hand over the painkillers and collect the envelope and walk them to the back door and watch them cross the parking lot. And you lock the door and get your coat and your keys and step out into the cool night air of the back lot. And the black van is parked in the corner, with its lights off. And you notice it approximately 2 seconds too late, which is approximately 2 seconds after it stops mattering that you noticed it, because the side doors are already opening and 2 men are already stepping out. Large and deliberate and moving with the particular economy of people who do not waste motion, who have performed this specific sequence of actions enough times to have refined it down to its essential elements. And one of them puts a bag over your head before you've completed the thought that should be, I should run. And everything goes dark and loud and the disorientation is total and physical. And they put you in the van and the van moves and you try to count turns and track time and distance, but your heart is too loud. And your breathing is too fast, and you can't organize your attention into anything useful. And then the van stops and the doors open and you're pulled out and you hear a door, and then the smell hits you. Antiseptic and filtered air and the particular cleanliness of a space maintained at clinical standards. And they walk you down a corridor and push you into a chair and cut the zip ties and the bag comes off. And you're in a room with glass walls, floor to ceiling, and through the glass you can see equipment that your clinic cannot aspire to, equipment that belongs in a level 1 trauma center. An operating table at the room's center with a body on it. And the man in the suit standing before you is not large or physically intimidating. He is instead the other kind of dangerous, the kind that doesn't need to be large, because largeness is a resource you deploy when you lack better resources, and this man has better resources. And he says, "You're the vet." Not a question, a file being confirmed. And he turns and points to the figure on the table and says, "That man needs help." And you look, and recognition arrives like a physical blow, like something you walked into in the dark. Because you know this face, the city knows this face, the man who controls the port, which means the man who controls what moves through the port, which means the man who controls a significant percentage of what moves through this city, period. And he is lying on that table looking surprisingly, disturbingly mortal. And you shake your head with your entire body participating in the refusal. And you explain that this man requires a real surgeon, someone who trained specifically for this. And the suit says, "Hospitals ask questions and file reports. We don't like questions." And a guard materializes from your peripheral vision, his hand resting on his weapon with the ease of long habit. And the suit says, "Mammals are mammals." And you look at the locked room and the glass walls and the guard and the suit and the crime lord on the table. And you walk to the sink and you scrub your hands. And your body makes the decision before your mind finishes making it. A woman in scrubs materializes at your side. You push through the door into the operating room. The smell of antiseptic sharpens, becomes immediate. And you check the crime lord's vitals on the monitor and read them with the practiced speed of someone who's read vitals in difficult moments many times. And you know what you're seeing, internal bleeding with compensatory mechanisms beginning to fail. The body doing its heroic and ultimately insufficient best to manage a loss it cannot sustain. And you look through the glass at the suit and tell him it has to be now. No more time. Every minute matters. And he nods. And the woman hands you the instruments with an anticipatory precision that means she's done this before. And your hand hovers over the crime lord's abdomen. And you pause. You actually pause. Because you know what this man is. What he has done. The specific catalog of damage he has left behind in this city. The business is burned, the family's broken, the people who crossed him, and were simply removed from the world as thoroughly as if they had never entered it. And the thought arrives clearly and without drama. You could let him die. Just hesitate a little too long. Call it a complication. Nobody could prove otherwise. And then your daughter's face appears, as it always appears at the critical moments, and you think about her graduation, her wedding, all the ordinary, irreplaceable moments that require you to be alive and present, and you begin. And the next 3 hours are a place outside time. A complete absorption in work that shuts down every other channel. No past and no future. only the immediate reality of the work, and the woman beside you is extraordinary, anticipating your needs before you've expressed them, handing you each instrument at the exact right moment, adjusting the light precisely when the angle shifts. And you work, and another hour passes, and your back has moved through pain into a buzzing numbness, and your legs feel distant, and your eyes sting with sweat, and you tie the final knot, and the crime lord is alive, and you feel nothing, or rather, you feel the specific thing that is the absence of what you expected to feel. No relief, no satisfaction, no pride in difficult work completed. Just a hollow, scooped-out sensation like something was removed from you during those hours and has not been replaced. And the suit enters and says, "Better than expected." And you tell him you need to go home. And the suit says, "Soon," and presses a button. And the glass walls go white. And the door is sealed, and you push against it and pound your fists against it, and the sound fills the room and stops. And you turn. And the crime lord's eyes are open, watching you with the patience of someone who has already decided everything relevant. And he points to the corner, and there is the bed, and the desk, and the lamp, and the textbooks. And he says, "I've been looking for someone like you for a very long time." And you look at the bed, and the books, and your own hands, these steady hands that have stitched up animals and people and one crime lord and will stitch up whatever is brought to them tomorrow. Because there is no door that opens from this side, because the cage was built so slowly and so carefully from your own choices that you never felt the walls going up, never recognized the trap until you were standing in the center of it. And you walk to the bed, and you sit down on its edge, and you reach for the first textbook, and you open it, and you begin to read, because you spent your whole life learning to save animals, and now you are one.